He flew in to finalize a $640 million merger. Polished shoes. Perfect timing. Every detail controlled until he saw her. A woman on a courthouse bench holding nothing but a manila folder and a fear she wasn't allowed to show. She wasn't part of the deal. But she stopped him cold. One question changed everything. "Do you want company while you wait?" He said yes, and never looked back. What began as a business trip became a movement that would save hundreds. Because one man stayed when it mattered most, and never left. Cameron Wolfe didn't believe in detours. He moved like the world had been built to make room for him. Limousines waiting, elevator doors held open, signatures handed to him with trembling pens. He was a man who closed deals, not started them. Mergers, acquisitions, dissolutions. He'd made a name out of rearranging other people's companies until they worked better under his watch. That morning, he flew into Boston to finalize a merger worth $640 million. It was supposed to be seamless. The other company's leadership was already aligned, the papers were in order, and his assistant had the itinerary down to the minute. Cameron barely glanced at the contract anymore. He knew the numbers by heart. The only thing that mattered was showing up, sitting down, and signing. He didn't expect the courthouse. He certainly didn't expect the woman. She wasn't there for the merger. She wasn't part of the company. She wasn't even in the same room. But she was the reason everything stopped. The first hour had gone exactly as planned. Cameron shook hands with the other executives, sat at the polished conference table, and nodded through the legal language. It wasn't until one of the lawyers excused himself to file a document with the court next door that Cameron wandered out to stretch his legs. That's when he saw her. She sat in the hallway of the courthouse, 2 benches down from the clerk's window, not crying, not speaking, just still. Her name, he would later learn, was Elise, but in that moment she was just a woman with a manila folder in her lap and a look on her face like she had already heard every kind of no. No one else seemed to notice her. People passed by without looking. Cameron paused. He told himself to keep walking. This wasn't his business. She wasn't part of the contract. But something in her stillness kept him rooted. After a moment, he walked over and sat down, one bench away, not too close. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "I'm waiting for a judge." "Court?" She nodded. "What for?" She finally turned. Her eyes were calm but tired. "Protective order. He's getting out today." Cameron went quiet. "I filed it last week," she said. "But they couldn't push it through in time, so I'm sitting here, hoping they'll read it before he finds me." Cameron looked down at the folder in her lap. The edges were bent, the corners soft from being held too long. "Do you have anyone with you?" he asked. She shook her head. Didn't want to ask anyone. Didn't want it to feel more real than it already is. He nodded. He didn't know what to say. For once in his life, the script had slipped out of reach. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Business deal," he said. "Next door." She smiled faintly. "That sounds cleaner than this." Cameron looked down the hall toward the clerk's office, then back at her. "Do you want company while you wait?" Elise hesitated, then said, "Sure." So he stayed. Not long after, a clerk stepped out and called her name. Elise stood, smoothing her jacket with trembling hands. Before she walked away, she turned and looked at him. "You don't have to wait." He said, "I know." She went inside. He waited anyway. An hour later, she came back out, paler, shaky, holding a paper in her hand like it was a matchbox in a thunderstorm. "Approved," she said, "just barely." "Do you have a ride?" he asked. She shook her head. "Let me call one for you." He didn't ask. He didn't offer. He just acted. They stood outside the courthouse under gray skies while the car arrived. Before she got in, she turned to him. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." Then she added, "You should go finish your merger." He shook his head. "No rush. Isn't $640 million kind of urgent?" "Not anymore." And he meant it. That night he returned to his hotel, but he didn't go over the contract. He didn't call his team. He sat in the dark, thinking about a woman who waited alone and a system that almost didn't say yes in time. The next morning, he called his lawyer. "I want to fund legal aid," he said, quietly, anonymously. "I want there to be a lawyer sitting beside the next Elise." His lawyer paused. "That's not really related to your portfolio." "It is now?" And just like that, a man who built his empire on deals walked away from one, to fight for someone he hadn't known 2 hours before, and to make sure no one else ever had to wait for safety by themselves again. Over the next few days, Cameron couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just Elise, but the moment, the bench, the folder, the stillness in her posture that said, "I've learned not to ask too much." He had built an entire career out of anticipating what people needed before they spoke. But when she'd looked at him, she hadn't needed answers. She just needed someone to stay. So that's what he started doing, quietly, consistently. He missed the final signing meeting for the merger. His team panicked. Legal scrambled. The press speculated. Cameron didn't offer excuses. He simply said, "Let it go. There's something more important now." Instead, he spent the week meeting with legal advocacy groups, sitting at the backs of courtrooms, watching as woman after woman sat alone on cold benches, clutching forms like shields. He didn't know what he expected to find, but what he saw made something inside him lock into place. It wasn't just Elise. It was all of them. By the end of the month, Cameron had established a private grant, the Wolfe Fund. It covered court filing fees, paid for emergency representation, and made sure that when someone walked into a courthouse for protection, they wouldn't have to do it by themselves. He didn't put his name on it. There were no press releases. But word spread quickly between shelters, clinics, caseworkers. In 3 months, the fund had helped 217 women secure orders that might have otherwise slipped through cracks. Still, he didn't hear from Elise. Not that he expected to. Then, one morning, his assistant handed him an envelope. No return address. Inside, a single note written in tight, slanted handwriting. "You waited with me. That changed more than you'll ever know. I've started over. I use my real name again. I carry my own keys. I haven't looked over my shoulder in 3 weeks. Thank you for not walking past. I hope you're still sitting beside the next girl. She'll need you too." He read it 3 times before folding it gently and placing it in his wallet. That afternoon he sat outside the same courthouse on the same bench. A woman exited the building, alone, holding a folded paper in her hands. He stood slowly and approached, keeping a respectful distance. "Do you have a ride?" he asked softly. She turned, hesitated, then nodded. "Someone's meeting me." He stepped back. "Good." She paused. "Were you just waiting here?" "I was." She looked him in the eye. "For me?" "For whoever needed someone to wait." She didn't say anything more, just gave a small nod and walked to the curb, standing taller than she had a moment before. That night, Cameron updated his will, quietly, no fanfare. He added a clause that set aside funding for every county courthouse in the state to ensure there would always be someone on the bench who wasn't there to judge or pass by, just to stay. Because once a woman sat alone with a folder in her lap and a name she wasn't ready to use. And now, because someone saw her, no one would ever have to wait alone again. Weeks passed, and the Wolfe Fund grew quietly, without headlines or ceremonies. Cameron kept it simple. Silent deposits, handwritten approvals, a team of case advocates trained to listen before speaking. He visited courthouses without a security detail, wore sweaters instead of suits, and sat on benches more often than he sat at boardroom tables. One morning, while reviewing a stack of letters from legal aid partners, Cameron came across one envelope that stood out. Inside was a photo, grainy, printed from a phone, and a short note. In the photo, a woman and a young girl holding hands outside a courthouse. The girl had a backpack shaped like a ladybug. The woman's face was turned away from the camera, but her posture was unmistakable, tall, defiant, safe. The note read, "She got her order. She got her daughter back. You didn't know her name, but she sat beside the same window Elise once did. Now she's building something. You helped." Cameron stared at the picture for a long time. Later that day, he took a walk. No phone, no meetings, just himself and the late afternoon sun slipping between buildings. He stopped outside the Boston courthouse. Same bench, same corridor. There was someone sitting there now. A teenage girl, fidgeting with the strap of her bag, eyes focused on the tile floor like it might crack open and swallow her. Cameron didn't hesitate. He sat 2 seats away. She glanced over, then back down. "You here with someone?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "It's just me?" "Not anymore." She didn't reply, but she didn't move away either. They sat in silence for 17 minutes. When her name was called, she stood, turned, looked at him. "Thanks," she said, "for waiting." "You're welcome," he replied. That night, back at his apartment, Cameron found Elise's letter again, the one he carried in his wallet. He read it slowly, then added a new one beside it. "Dear you, I didn't know what I was doing that day. I just knew I couldn't keep walking. But now I do know. Waiting is its own kind of fight. And showing up again and again is how we keep others from falling through the cracks. You weren't a detour. You were the reason I changed direction." He folded it, placed it in the envelope beside hers, didn't seal it. A week later, he returned to the courthouse. Same time, same hallway. He left the envelope on the bench, and when he walked away, he did so without checking to see who might find it. Because staying wasn't about being seen. It was about making sure someone else felt worth stopping for, just like she once had. Summer came quietly. Not in a burst of heat or sun, but in small moments. Open windows in the morning, iced coffee instead of hot. Longer shadows stretched across the marble floor of the courthouse hallway. Cameron kept showing up. He never told anyone where he went on those mornings when he didn't answer his phone. His board had stopped asking. His company ran without him now. He'd built it to long ago. But he hadn't expected to step away and find something more vital than control: purpose. The courthouse staff started recognizing him, not with fanfare or formality, but with quiet nods and the occasional "same bench" from the clerk. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he brought nothing but time. He didn't always sit with someone. Some days the bench stayed empty, but even then he stayed, because someone always came eventually. One afternoon, a young woman, early 20s, arms crossed like armor, walked in holding a sealed envelope. She sat 2 spaces away from him, never speaking, not even looking up. But when she stood to leave, she left the envelope behind. Cameron waited until she was gone before picking it up. Inside was a letter. "I almost didn't come. Almost turned around. Almost convinced myself I was exaggerating. But you were there. You didn't ask me why. You didn't make it about you. And that helped me make it about me. I stayed. I filed. I don't know what happens next. But I'm not alone anymore. Thank you, stranger." He folded the letter and placed it in the small leather notebook he now carried with him every day. It was nearly full now, page after page of moments like that one, words left behind by people who needed someone to simply not look away. One page was just a sentence, written in faint pencil. "You looked up. That saved me." He didn't know who had written it. He never needed to. That week he met with the director of a local shelter. "I want to do more," he said. "Not just money. Something tangible." The director studied him. "You already have." "It's not enough." She tapped a folder on her desk. "We're starting a project, a community advocate network. Volunteers who sit with clients through hearings, intake, interviews, not as lawyers, just as presence." Cameron leaned forward. "I want in." The director smiled. "You're already trained." By July, the Wolfe Advocate Network had 30 volunteers. and every single one of them had a story that started the same way. I saw someone stay. Now I want to be that person for someone else. One morning, a clerk handed Cameron a small envelope. This came in for you. No return address, just his name, handwritten in neat, careful print. Inside was a folded photo. It was Elise. Standing in a park, hair longer now, sun on her shoulders, holding hands with a little boy, his face turned mid-laugh. On the back, a note. He's mine, I'm safe, and I've stopped waiting. You gave me a bench, and I built a world from it. I thought you should know. Cameron sat with that photo for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the hallway, and took his usual seat. And when a new woman walked in, face pale, hands shaking, Cameron looked up, smiled, nodded toward the space beside him, and said, "It's open, if you want it." And just like that, another story began. By the end of July, the bench had become more than a seat. It was a symbol, a ritual, a lifeline. People started calling it the waiting place, but Cameron knew better. It wasn't a place where people waited for something to happen. It was where they finally stopped waiting alone. He never sat with expectation, only intention, to be present, to hold space. Some days no one came, others 3 women in a row. He never asked why they were there. He only ever asked, "Would you like someone to stay?" Sometimes that was all they needed. One Thursday morning, a woman in her 40s approached with a toddler on her hip and a diaper bag slipping off her shoulder. She looked exhausted. Not the kind that sleep could fix, the kind that comes from years of carrying too much. She didn't speak at first, just sat beside him and bounced the child gently on her knee. After a few minutes, she said, "I used to be someone." Cameron turned. "You still are." She didn't reply, but when her name was called and she stood to go, she looked back at him. "Thank you for seeing me before the court did." That night, Cameron walked home slowly, the city lights soft in the humidity. He passed the restaurant where he used to take clients, the hotel he used to live in more than sleep in, the office tower with his name still on the door. None of it felt like his anymore. When he got home, he wrote another letter. He didn't address it. He didn't mail it. He just folded it and placed it in his journal. "Dear one who waits, you don't need to earn the right to be believed. You don't have to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. You are not a burden. You are not too late. And you will not be forgotten. I am here. We are here. And we will not look away." The next morning, he printed it on heavy paper, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and taped it beneath the bench. By noon, someone had underlined the word "believed" in pencil. By evening, someone else had added a note beneath it. "I read this while shaking, and now I'm still shaking. But I'm going in, because I don't feel invisible anymore." Cameron traced the edge of the paper with his thumb, then sat back down. Same spot, same posture, same promise. He didn't need a gavel or a headline to know he was making a difference. He had the bench. He had the people. He had the staying. And every time someone sat beside him and exhaled like it was the first time they'd felt safe enough to, he knew, he was exactly where he needed to be, still, listening and ready for whoever came next. By early August, the courthouse halls felt different, not louder, just less heavy. The staff had begun referring to the bench as the soft space. They'd started quietly directing people toward it without explanation, just a gesture and a look that said, "You might find something you need over there," and people did, every day. Survivors, advocates, teenagers with trembling hands, mothers with trembling voices, even a retired judge once. He came and sat silent for 20 minutes, then left with tears in his eyes and nothing in his hands. Cameron sat through it all. He was never the hero. He was the held gaze, the quiet nod, the presence that reminded people they were not alone. On a particularly hot Thursday, a young woman, barely 20, slid onto the bench beside him. Her arms were covered in old bruises. Her bag was too light to carry anything except fear and a few papers. "I don't have proof," she said without being asked. Cameron didn't respond, just waited. She added, "But I can't stay. And I'm scared that not having a police report means no one will believe me." Cameron reached into his bag, pulled out a folded sheet, and handed it to her. It was a copy of the first letter he had written after Elise. "You don't need to prove your pain to deserve protection. Your story matters even if it doesn't come with evidence. Being here is enough. You're enough, and someone believes you." She read it, folded it, held it to her chest. Then she stood, looked at him, and whispered, "Okay, I'm ready." That night Cameron didn't go home. He walked to a small cafe and sat in the corner, notebook in hand, a cup of tea going cold beside him. He wrote 10 more copies of that letter, and left each one tucked into different corners of the courthouse the next morning, behind tissue boxes, in pamphlet racks, on bathroom counters. Within a week, they were all gone. On Monday, someone left a reply under the bench. "I came because someone like you stayed. Now I want to stay for someone else." Cameron pinned it to the underside of the bench, not to hide it, but to keep it safe, for the ones who knew to look beneath the surface. That Friday he met Elise again. He hadn't expected her. She walked into the lobby like sunlight, brighter, taller, steady in a way she hadn't been when they first met. She didn't sit on the bench. She stood in front of it. "I came to return something," she said, holding out a folded page. He took it, unfolded it. It was the letter she had sent him months ago, the one he'd carried in his wallet. Only now, beneath her handwriting, she had written one more line. "P.S. I found someone who needed a bench. I brought them to one. They sat. And they stayed. And that's because of you." Cameron read it once. Then, without a word, slid it back into his wallet, right behind hers. "You're not waiting anymore," he said. She smiled. "No, I'm walking. But it started here." They hugged, brief, brave. She left. He sat. And somewhere across the building, someone new was reading their first letter and taking their first step, because the bench stayed, because Cameron stayed, and because staying had become a movement. By the middle of August, the bench had a rhythm of its own. People came and went, like tides. Some stayed a minute, others stayed until closing. A few came back day after day, never speaking, never writing, just being. And that was enough. Cameron now brought extra letters in his bag, folded in thirds, printed on thick paper with rounded corners. They weren't flashy, just words, words that had stayed with him, words he hoped might stay with someone else. One afternoon a boy, 18 maybe, walked in and sat at the far end of the bench. His hands were shaking. His lips were pressed so tightly together they almost vanished into his face. After 10 minutes of silence, he spoke without looking up. "Is this the place where people come when they're deciding if they matter?" Cameron didn't flinch. "It can be," he said. The boy nodded, pulled his sleeves down over his fists. "I'm tired of having to explain why I'm not okay." "You don't have to." Another pause. "I've never had anyone wait for me." Cameron reached into his bag, pulled out a letter, and held it out. The boy took it, unfolded it carefully. "Dear you, you are not difficult to love. You are just waiting to be met with the kind of quiet. That doesn't ask you to shrink. Let this bench be your place. Let this moment be your proof. You are not too much, and you are not alone." The boy pressed the paper to his chest, sat there for a long time, then stood and whispered, "Thanks for sitting here." Cameron nodded. "Always." That evening he stayed late after the hallway emptied. The building creaked with quiet. A janitor pushed a mop down the corridor. Lights flickered in the corner. Cameron took out his notebook and wrote a letter of his own. "To the one who sat beside me today, I don't know your name, but I know your strength and your stillness, and the way you reminded me why I keep showing up. You are the reason benches are sacred. You are the reason the waiting is never wasted. Thank you for being brave enough to take up space. I saw you, and I still do." He folded it, placed it under the bench. Not for that boy to find, but for whoever came next. The next morning, someone did, and when they left, they tucked a note beside it. "I thought I came to be invisible, but I was seen. And maybe that's the beginning of everything." Cameron read it once, then sat back down. Same spot, same silence, same promise that I'm here and still, and waiting with you. Late August brought a quieter kind of heat. The air thick but gentle, like even summer had learned how to slow down. The bench, now polished by time and the weight of so many stories, seemed to hold its own memory. Every visitor added something to it, even if they never spoke a word. Cameron had started arriving earlier, not because anyone told him to, just because the morning felt like a clean page, and he wanted to be part of the first word written on it. That Tuesday, a woman came in holding a folded sweater and a paper form. She stood near the edge of the bench, unsure. Cameron nodded, stood, offered her the seat. "You don't have to explain," he said. She looked down at the form in her hand. "This is my third time filling this out." "That means you're still trying." She sat, carefully, like the bench might break under her. "It's strange," she said after a moment, "to have a place that doesn't demand anything. It's stranger how rare that is." She gave a small laugh, soft, surprised. "Do people cry here?" "Only when they want to." "Do you?" Cameron looked down at his hands. "Sometimes I don't realize I have until someone says thank you." She nodded, folded the form once more and whispered, "Then, thank you." When she stood, she left the sweater behind. Inside the folded fabric, Cameron found a note. "I wore this the first time he hit me. Today I don't need it anymore. Let it keep someone else warm. Let it remind someone they're not walking out alone." He folded the sweater and placed it on the shelf behind the bench, under a sign he wrote in quiet ink. "This is a soft place, for leaving behind what no longer belongs to you, and for picking up what does." That night, he walked the long way home, past the same park he used to jog through back when his life was about numbers and finish lines. He paused by a bench there, too, sat, closed his eyes, imagined Elise, imagined the girl with the backpack, the boy with shaking hands, the woman who left her sweater behind, all of them echoes in a life he never planned but had somehow built with both hands. He pulled a slip of paper from his coat pocket, wrote slowly, carefully. "Dear you, if you're sitting here wondering whether anyone will ever understand, we do, and we stayed, just so you'd have somewhere to begin." He folded the paper, tucked it under the armrest, stood. And as he walked away, the sky turned that soft shade of lavender that only comes when something is ending but still wants to be remembered. And somewhere behind him, someone sat down and stayed. By the first days of September, the light had changed. It wasn't just the way it angled through the windows at Gate 27, or the way it softened across the courthouse hallway where Cameron spent most of his mornings. It was something deeper, quieter, a shift in how people entered the space, less like strangers, more like people returning to something that had already been waiting for them. That week, a woman arrived with a suitcase and nothing else. She didn't speak when she sat, just looked at the bench like it had called her by name. Cameron sat beside her, not touching, not talking, just present. After a while, she opened the suitcase, not to unpack, but to breathe. Inside, a few clothes, a worn teddy bear, and a folder thick with legal papers. She slid the folder toward Cameron. "I'm not here for myself," she said. He nodded. "That's still enough." "It's for my sister. She's gone now, but she never made it this far." Cameron placed a hand gently over the folder. "Then let's carry it the rest of the way." She stayed for nearly 2 hours, said little, left everything. When she finally stood, she handed him a letter. She didn't have a bench. She had silence, and bruises, and doors that never opened. But I found one, and now it's open for both of us. Thank you for making a place where memory isn't shame, where grief can sit without being rushed. Cameron added it to the collection under the bench, what the courthouse staff had started to call the heartbeat box. Letters never read aloud, never displayed, just held, like they needed somewhere to exist without being explained. That same night he returned to his apartment and sat in the kitchen with the lights off. He wrote a new letter slowly, with hands that had learned how to hold truth without flinching. Dear one who showed up for someone else, you carried 2 weights today, theirs and yours, and you didn't drop either. You made it. And in doing so, you let someone else believe they could too. You're not just brave. You're part of the structure now, the ones who build the bench, the ones who wait so no one waits alone. You are not forgotten. And neither are they. He printed 10 copies. The next morning, he placed one in the folder the woman had left, another on the courthouse windowsill, another in the waiting room where children played with broken crayons and worried about things far too big for their age. One he folded into the side pocket of the heartbeat box. And the last? He placed it on the bench. Someone picked it up before lunch. Cameron saw her read it, eyes wide, hand covering her mouth, shoulders shaking just slightly. She didn't speak, but she stayed. And later, before she left, she slid a new note under the cushion. I thought this was a story about what I lost, but I think it's about who I get to become, because someone waited with me. I am not late. I am just beginning. And Cameron sat, as always, not to rescue and not to fix, but to remind that beginnings don't always start with doors. Sometimes they start with benches and someone who stayed. By mid-September, the leaves outside the courthouse had begun to turn, like they'd finally given themselves permission to let go. The sky shifted too, more blue than gold, more still than bright. People came to the bench wearing sweaters now. They tucked their hands into their sleeves, not always because of the cold, but because holding something tightly still made them feel safer. Cameron understood. He remembered that kind of grip. That Friday, a girl no older than 16 sat down beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just slid a note into his palm and stared straight ahead. He unfolded it. This is not a statement. This is a whisper. Please help me be louder someday. He didn't say anything. He just folded the paper, placed it in his pocket, and whispered back, You already are. She looked at him, eyes glassy, then nodded and stood. She didn't leave the building, just walked inside, toward a future that wasn't quiet anymore. That same afternoon, Cameron left a new card under the bench cushion. He'd been writing it for weeks, unsure when it would be needed. Now felt right. Dear someone who hasn't spoken yet, there is no expiration date on your voice. There is no too late in this hallway. You don't need the right words. You just need the courage to say one, even if it's small, even if it's only a breath. We'll hear it, and we'll wait with you. That night he walked home slowly, passing under trees already dropping their first leaves. He thought about Elise, about the girl with the heavy backpack, about the woman who left her sweater behind, about the boy who had once asked if this was where people came when they didn't know if they mattered. He'd kept every note, every folded piece of paper, every whisper. Not in boxes, not in files, but in his steps, in his stillness, in the way he had learned how to sit beside someone without asking them to be ready. That weekend, the courthouse posted a small plaque beside the bench. He hadn't asked for it. He didn't even know it was coming. It said, This bench is sacred, and not because of who sits here, but because of who stays. Cameron read it once, then sat back down. Same seat, same posture, same silence, steady and full. He watched the door and waited, because someone always came. Late September arrived like a held breath, cool mornings, shorter days, trees beginning to burn gold around the edges. The courthouse bench had been polished by more than weather now. It had been worn smooth by presence, by weight, by people who once came afraid and left, if not whole, then no longer alone. Cameron noticed a small folded note already resting on the bench when he arrived that morning. He picked it up gently, like it might crack if handled wrong. No name, no handwriting he recognized. Just one line, written in black ink. "I almost didn't make it here." He sat down, note in hand, and waited. 2 hours later, a woman approached slowly, hesitantly. She looked from him to the bench, then to the note still resting in his lap. "That's mine," she said quietly. Cameron nodded. Then it already mattered. She sat down beside him. "I didn't sleep last night," she whispered. "I almost turned around 3 times. I walked past the door twice before I could come in. But you're here." She looked at him. "Barely. Barely is still here." She breathed out slowly, and in that breath was everything she hadn't said. Fear, grief, the deep ache of almost giving up, and the flicker of something else, too. Beginning. Before her name was called, she turned to him and asked, "Why do you keep showing up?" He thought about that for a moment, then said, "Because someone might be watching the door, hoping they won't walk through it alone." She gave a small nod and walked away. He sat a little longer. That night, he wrote a new card and placed it in the back pocket of the bench. "Dear you, this isn't about bravery. It's about arrival. You got here, we saw you. We stayed, and you can too." The next day, someone had underlined arrival in blue pen. The day after that, someone wrote underneath it, "I didn't think arrival counted if I was shaking, but maybe that's what makes it count more." That weekend, Cameron visited a courthouse 2 counties away. A staff member there had reached out quietly, saying they wanted to create a bench like his, a soft place, a waiting space. He met with them in an empty hallway that smelled like dust and too many years of unspoken stories. They showed him the corner they'd chosen. He stood there for a long time. Then he pulled out a letter from his coat pocket and handed it to them. "This is the beginning. Put this under the first cushion. Let the next person find it." When he left, they promised him they'd leave the door cracked. And on the way home, Cameron stopped by his usual bench. Someone had left a flower there. No card, no message, just a bloom placed gently on the wood. He sat beside it, folded his hands in his lap, and whispered into the air, "I saw you." And maybe, somewhere just beyond the courthouse doors, someone exhaled for the first time in a very long time, because someone had waited and meant it. By early October, the light outside the courthouse turned amber before noon. Shadows stretched longer. Footsteps echoed a little louder in the hallway, and the bench, now worn smooth with witness, sat steady as ever, waiting without demand, offering without question. Cameron arrived that morning with something new in his coat pocket, a letter not written by him, but by someone who had once sat in silence for over an hour beside him. She had returned the week before, not to ask for help, but to leave a gift. "It's not for me anymore," she'd said. "It's for the one I used to be." Cameron hadn't opened it until now. He sat on the bench, the paper still warm from his hand, and read, "Dear me, you didn't fail because you were afraid. You were afraid and still found the door. You were afraid and still sat down. You were afraid and still told the truth. And now look. Someone else is reading your story because you stayed long enough to become the reason they did." He folded the letter carefully and slid it under the bench, resting it just so. That afternoon, a young man walked in, dressed in business clothes, overdressed for the space. He looked like someone who'd spent his life blending in, succeeding just enough to stay unseen. He sat without speaking. Cameron nodded, didn't say a word. After 10 minutes, the man leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I thought I was here for someone else," he said. "Turns out it's me." Cameron gave the smallest smile. "That happens more than you'd think." "I've always been the one who fixes things, helps, listens. And today, I'm the one who needs someone to stay." Cameron just nodded. "Then you've come to the right place." They sat quietly after that. Before leaving, the man pulled a notebook from his jacket. tore out a page, left it on the bench. I'm not used to being held, but I think I could get used to being seen, even in this, especially in this. That evening, after the building emptied, Cameron pulled out his own notebook and wrote just 4 lines. We sit for the ones who speak and for the ones who shake. We sit for the almosts. We sit for the not yets. He left it under the bench beside the others. In the morning, a flower joined it. Then a pebble, smooth and painted with the word brave. Then a napkin with a single word on it, again. And Cameron sat, as always, in the same spot. Same silence, same promise. If you arrive, we will stay. Mid-October settled in like a whisper, soft and certain. The trees around the courthouse blazed with color, crimson, gold, fire orange, like even the leaves were proud of how far they'd come. Every morning, Cameron passed beneath them on his way to the bench, crunching over reminders that letting go could be beautiful too. That Monday, someone had already been there before him. A scarf was draped over the bench backrest, folded neatly, a note tucked beneath it. I wore this the day I almost didn't come. Now I'm leaving it for the next person who thinks they won't. Let it hold you until your own strength returns. Cameron sat beside it, hands folded, watching the morning light filter through the courthouse windows. People passed. A few glanced his way. One nodded. A little girl in a puffy blue jacket smiled at him as she walked by holding her mother's hand. By noon, a woman in her 30s sat down next to him, clutching a folder so tightly the edges had curled. She didn't speak for a while. Then, eyes forward, she said, "I read about this bench." Cameron nodded. "A lot of people do." "I didn't think I'd come, but the scarf—" She reached over, touched the fabric gently. "I don't know who left it, but I needed to see it." "You're here," Cameron said. "That's more than enough." She exhaled, then laughed. "Just a little, just enough. I've been holding my breath for 3 years." He didn't ask what had happened. He never did, but she kept talking. "I always thought healing meant going back to who you were before. And now, I think it means becoming who you needed back then." She didn't stay long, but before she left, she slid her folder beneath the bench just beside the scarf. "It's empty," she said, "but maybe someone else needs to fill it." That night, Cameron took the scarf and the folder to Gate 27. Leo was there arranging the new display shelf they'd built for artifacts of staying, items left behind by people who didn't need them anymore, not because the pain was gone, but because they no longer carried it alone. When Cameron showed him the scarf and the folder, Leo didn't ask questions. He just cleared a space and made room. The sign above the shelf read, "These were carried through. Now they're here for you. Take what you need. Leave when you're ready." Before Cameron left, Leo handed him a fresh envelope. "Someone dropped this off for you." Cameron opened it on the walk home. Inside, "You don't know me, but your bench made me believe I could survive the day, so I did. And now I'm wondering what else I can survive. Maybe everything. Thanks for staying long enough for me to arrive." Cameron folded the letter and placed it in his coat pocket next to Elise's, next to the boy's drawing, next to every reason he never needed to explain. And the next morning, before the courthouse opened, he returned to the bench. Same seat, same silence, same steady hope, because someone always came, and someone would need him to stay. By late October, the mornings came with mist, the kind that softened everything, the sidewalk cracks, the courthouse steps, even the breath between people. The bench sat quiet under the overhang, damp with dew, but waiting like always. A few fallen leaves had gathered in the corner beneath it, untouched. Cameron arrived early, coffee in one hand, a letter in the other. He set the cup down and brushed the leaves aside, tucked the new letter beneath the cushion like he always did. "Dear you, you don't have to be ready to be worth sitting beside. You don't have to speak to be heard. Some things are carried in silence, and some love sits quietly next to fear until it loosens its grip. I'm here, still, so you don't have to be alone in the waiting." He sat. An hour passed. Then a young man arrived, mid-20s maybe, dressed like he wanted to disappear. Hoodie up, head down, hands buried in his sleeves. He didn't make eye contact, just sat at the other end of the bench and stayed. 10 minutes, then 20. Finally he whispered, "Is it true?" Cameron looked over. "What part?" "That someone will wait even if you're not brave." Cameron nodded. "Especially then." The man wiped his nose on his sleeve. "I've failed. A lot." "So have I. I don't know what I'm doing here." "You're sitting. That's something." The man didn't reply, but he didn't leave either. When his name was called over the intercom, he stood slowly, then turned back. "Can you wait until I'm done?" Cameron smiled. "I'll be right here." That night, Cameron found a folded page tucked between the bench slats. No envelope, no name, just a single sentence. He waited, so I stayed. He didn't move it, just smoothed it flat and left it there. The next day, someone had drawn a heart beside it in pencil, soft, uneven, true. By the weekend, a small group had gathered around the bench, not a crowd. Just 3 people who didn't seem to know each other, but sat close anyway. A quiet conversation bloomed between them, small things, sips of stories, the kind of talking that builds slowly after long silences. Cameron stood nearby, not intruding, just present. One of them, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a worn coat, looked up and said, "You're the reason this place feels like a yes." He blinked. "A yes?" She nodded. "Like all the other places said? No, but this one doesn't ask questions first." He sat with them after that. No role, no speech, just another human who knew what it meant to feel like the bench was the only thing holding him up. Later, he left a final note for the day. "This bench is not a finish line. It's a hand, offered slowly, steady, and ready to stay as long as you need." The next morning it was gone, but in its place was a new letter, folded, taped gently to the armrest. I came alone. But I'm leaving with something. Not a person, a promise. That if I make it through today, someone will still be here tomorrow. And Cameron was, just like always, 1 seat away, still, and staying. By Halloween, the bench had seen more confessions than a pulpit and more courage than any courtroom it sat outside of. Pumpkins lined the courthouse steps, some carved by the children of staff, others dropped off anonymously, faces ranging from grins to grimaces. One sat beneath the bench, small and uncarved, with a simple note taped to its side. "Not every story needs a face to be real." Cameron read it and smiled. That morning the mist was heavier, clinging to his coat and soaking into the wood. Still, he sat, thermos in hand, letter in his pocket, the one he'd written at 4 a.m. when he couldn't sleep. "Dear October, you held so many things I thought would break me. But here I am, still breathing, still listening, still finding pieces of myself in strangers, who don't even know they've given me back my name." He placed the letter beneath the bench like always, not for a particular person, just for the next one who might need to know they weren't the only one feeling like the month had tried to swallow them whole. Around noon, a woman in a costume, nothing dramatic, just a black sweater and cat ears, sat beside him. She didn't speak for a while, just pulled a letter from her coat and handed it to him. "I was 14 the first time he hit me," she said softly. "I'm 34 now, and today is the first day I'm filing anything." Cameron held the letter carefully. "You came." "I almost didn't. I told myself I'd walk past and just look." She pointed to the pumpkin. "That note, it's why I stayed." He nodded, still holding her letter. "Can I keep this?" "No. Put it under the bench," she said. "Someone else will need it more than you." After she left, he unfolded the page. "Dear you, I told myself for years I was waiting for the right time, but I was really waiting for proof I wasn't weak. Turns out, showing up scared is strength. Today, I opened a door. Even if it slams behind me, I'll never forget that I walked through it." He slid it under the cushion. That evening, just before the courthouse closed, a teenager with tear-streaked eyeliner and shaking fingers sat down. She stared ahead, eyes fixed on something far away. Cameron didn't speak. After a while she asked, "What if I already left and came back?" "Then that's how your story's shaped. I left someone who hurt me and then went back. I thought that canceled the courage." He turned toward her. "It doesn't." She stared at the mist rising from the pavement. "Are you sure?" He reached under the bench and pulled out the letter, handed it to her. She read it twice, then whispered, "Oh." And that was it. Oh. Later, after she left, he added a new card to the side of the bench, tucked behind the pumpkin. "Dear November, we're not brand new. We're just braver than we were before. We've already learned how to walk away. Now we're learning how to stay." When he returned the next morning, someone had drawn a small gold star beside those words. No signature, no other note, just proof that even when the air grew colder, even when the light faded sooner, even when the month turned over, the bench stayed. And so did he. By the first week of November, the mornings came cold and crisp, with breath visible in the air and hands tucked deeper into coat sleeves. The bench, now damp with dew by sunrise, had begun to collect small offerings. Mittens left behind, folded napkins with quiet messages, a thermos of tea one visitor had forgotten, and someone else had chosen not to steal. Cameron sat like always, a little earlier now, layered in scarves he never used to wear. He brought hand warmers in his pockets, just in case the person beside him needed one more than he did. That Friday, a man in his late 40s approached the bench. He didn't sit right away, just stood with his hands in his coat and eyes on the concrete. "I've passed this hallway for a year," he said. "Always told myself I didn't belong here." "You do," Cameron said. "You always did." The man finally sat, exhaling slowly. "I used to believe staying meant being strong, even if it hurt, even if I wasn't safe." Cameron nodded. "That's what we're taught." The man rubbed at his face. "But leaving? That felt like failure." "It's not." "I know that now, but it's taken a long time to say it out loud." Cameron said nothing, just stayed. The man stayed too, for nearly an hour. When he left, he didn't say goodbye, but he placed a folded card on the bench. Cameron waited until the hallway emptied to read it. "Dear me, you did not betray anyone by choosing yourself. You did not quit. You simply stopped handing your heart to people who never learned how to hold it. You're not too late. You're right on time." Cameron placed it beneath the cushion where it belonged. The bench was more than wood and bolts now. It was a library of moments, a temple of almosts, a resting place for everything people weren't ready to carry alone. That evening, at home, he pulled out his notebook and added a new entry. Day 301. The bench isn't quieter in the winter, it's just more honest. People come colder, they stay longer, and they leave behind truths they've never told anyone, not even themselves. The next day, a young woman came with a baby in a carrier. She didn't sit, but stood just in front of the bench, rocking gently. She looked at Cameron and said, "I left him last night, the father. I didn't know if I'd be able to breathe today." "You are," Cameron said. She nodded, eyes rimmed red. "It hurts, but it doesn't burn. That's healing." Before she left, she slipped a pacifier onto the bench. Not a letter, not a poem, just a small sign that someone had chosen to walk through fire and come out holding something new. Cameron left it there. He added a new sign that evening, just above the right armrest. "This bench is not a waiting room. It's a witness. Sit, unfold, begin again." And someone did, the next day and the one after, because the bench never left, and neither did he. By mid-November, the sun began setting before most people finished their workday. The courthouse lights flickered on earlier, casting long shadows down the marble hallway. The bench sat in its usual place, patient and unchanged, though the stories around it grew heavier, people arriving wrapped in more than coats now. History, grief, the weight of a year they barely survived. Cameron arrived earlier each morning, not out of duty, out of knowing someone might need to see that someone was already there. On a Wednesday, just before Thanksgiving, a woman sat down beside him, early 20s, hair braided, hands trembling. "I don't have a letter," she said. "You don't need one," he replied. She looked straight ahead. "I came here last year. Didn't make it inside." "You did today." She nodded. "I was scared that if I sat again, it would mean I failed." "It doesn't. I almost didn't make it. But you did." She stayed for 20 minutes, then stood, pulled a bracelet from her wrist, small, woven, frayed at the ends, and tied it around the bench's leg. "For the next me," she said. Later, after she was gone, Cameron found a napkin folded neatly on the bench, inked in blue pen. "Thank you for not asking what I was waiting for not asking how I got here, for just sitting long enough, for me to believe I could too." He folded it, added it to the soft pile beneath the seat. That night he wrote a card and pinned it beside the bench. It read, "Dear you, the holidays are coming, and maybe they don't feel like warmth to you. Maybe they feel like reminders, empty chairs, tight smiles. Maybe this season has always made you shrink, but not here, not on this bench. Here you can expand. Here you can take up space. Even if all you do is sit and breathe, especially then, we'll be here, still, and ready." The next morning, a scarf had joined the bracelet on the bench's leg. Later that week, a staff member stopped Cameron in the hallway. "I sat there yesterday," she said quietly. "No one knew, but I needed it." Cameron nodded. "That's what it's for." She smiled. "Then I'm glad you stayed, long enough for me to remember I could." And when the bench creaked beneath her weight again the next day, Cameron didn't look over. He just stayed. Because sometimes the ones who build safety into the silence don't need to be noticed. They just need to keep holding the space. And that was exactly what he did. The week of Thanksgiving arrived with gray skies and quiet mornings. The courthouse halls echoed more than usual, some staff taking time off, others moving a little slower, carrying with them the heaviness this season often brought. Cameron brought an extra thermos of coffee and a second scarf just in case someone showed up without one. On Tuesday morning he found a letter already waiting on the bench, folded in half, no envelope, tucked just under the right edge like it had been placed there with both intention and care. He opened it slowly. "Dear stranger, I sat here last November, but I didn't go inside. I walked away. I told myself I was weak. But I carried your silence with me for a year, and now I'm back. Because if someone could stay that still for that long, maybe I can stand for myself this time." Cameron read it 3 times before placing it in the pouch beneath the seat marked "Returned Stories." He ran his fingers along the edge of the wood as if to say, "Thank you for coming back." Just before noon, a man in a rumpled jacket sat down beside him. 30s, eyes red but dry. "She left last week," the man said softly. "Took the kids." Cameron didn't ask questions. The man shook his head. "I told myself I'd never end up in a place like this. And now? Now I'm here, wondering if maybe this is the place where I start figuring it out." They sat for a long time. Eventually the man stood. He didn't say goodbye, but he placed something on the bench as he left, a single house key tied to a note. "This belonged to a version of me who couldn't change. I'm done carrying him. Let someone else start new." Cameron placed the key in the artifacts of leaving jar at gate 27 later that evening. Leo was there, lighting candles along the window ledge. "Cold day," he said. Cameron nodded. "But they still came." "They always do," Leo replied, "because the bench stays." That night, Cameron returned to the courthouse long after it had closed. He sat beneath the awning in the quiet dark, bundled in layers, holding a new letter. He didn't leave it on the bench this time. He read it aloud. To no one and everyone. "Dear you, the world might not make space for your breaking, but this bench does. This hallway does. I do. You are not too much, not too broken, not too late. You are exactly on time for your own beginning. We kept the seat warm. Come sit. And as he folded it and tucked it under the bench, the wind stirred just enough to move the bracelet tied there, still fluttering like a quiet flag for the next person passing through. Then Cameron stood, same coat, same scarf, same steady heart, and walked into the season carrying every story that had stayed behind. Thanksgiving came and went, with more stillness than celebration. Gate 27 remained open, quietly, gently, through the holiday week. A sign was placed in the window, written in Leo's handwriting. We know this week is loud for some and lonely for others. Come in if you need a quiet place to remember you're allowed to just be. Cameron visited each day. He brought extra candles, tea, and a new letter for the bench, folded in half and placed beneath the cushion before the courthouse even opened. Dear you, this week might remind you of who's not at your table. It might make you feel like you're behind or missing or wrong somehow. But let this bench be a table too. Let it be where you are welcomed without requirement. Let it be enough, because you are, even now, especially now. On Thursday, while the city buzzed with parades and pie, the hallway was still, until just past 10 when a woman walked in. No coat, just a hoodie and a pair of gloves that didn't match. She sat without speaking. Cameron sat beside her, not close, just near enough to say, I'm here. After several minutes, she reached into her pocket and held out a sandwich. It's peanut butter. I made 2, in case someone else forgot to eat today. Cameron accepted it with both hands. Thank you. She didn't say anything more, but when she left, she pressed a napkin into his palm, scrawled on it, I've spent a lot of Thanksgivings making myself small so I wouldn't ruin the mood. But here, I didn't have to be anything at all. That felt like the kindest kind of full. He folded it carefully and tucked it under the bench beside the others. Later that night, back home, he wrote a note of his own. He didn't plan to leave it anywhere, not yet. Dear ones who chose solitude over survival theater, you were not wrong to step away. You were not selfish to protect your peace. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. There is nothing more sacred than the choice to stay in your own skin. When the world demands performance, we saw you. We stayed with you. We always will. The next morning, someone left a coffee cup on the bench. On the side, written in black marker, I didn't know where to go, but I remembered the stories. So I came here, and I stayed. Cameron picked it up, held it close, then sat. And as November tipped into its final days, and the wind outside grew sharper, and the world got louder again with decorations and deadlines and memory, the bench stayed. So did he. And together they held the door for anyone still walking in. By the last week of November, the hallway light had changed. It came in colder now, slanting across the floor in soft gray stripes. People walked faster through the courthouse, coats pulled tight, heads down against the wind. But still, some slowed near the bench. Some sat. Some left something behind. Cameron came each morning with a quiet steadiness that had become its own kind of tradition. He no longer wondered if anyone would show up. They always did. And even if they didn't, the bench still had work to do. Presence, after all, wasn't about the crowd. It was about the promise. That Tuesday, a man in his 60s sat down beside him, clean-shaven, pressed shirt. The kind of man who looked like he'd spent his whole life earning respect by not speaking about what hurt. After a long silence, the man asked, "Does this work?" Cameron glanced over. "What part?" "The sitting, the waiting, the hoping someone else will understand." Cameron nodded. "It's not about fixing, just holding, just staying." The man exhaled. "My daughter's inside, filing for a restraining order. I raised her to be strong, but I didn't know how strong meant scared, too." Cameron said nothing, just placed a hand gently over the man's, the way he'd learned, quiet and steady. She doesn't know I'm out here, the man added. She'll feel it, Cameron said. Trust me. They sat for almost an hour. When the man stood to leave, he placed a folded piece of paper under the bench. Cameron waited until he was gone before reading it. Dear daughter, I didn't know the kind of strength you'd need, but I see it now, and I'm learning from it. I stayed, even if I didn't say the right thing, and I will keep staying until the door behind you stays closed and the one ahead stays open. Cameron placed it in the Held by Others folder, the one for stories that weren't from survivors themselves, but from the ones who chose to show up beside them. Later that week, someone left behind a red scarf. It was soft, clean, lightly scented with lavender. Pinned to it was a note. I don't need it anymore, because someone else finally held me. So now let this hold someone else. Cameron draped it over the bench's armrest, a symbol, a warmth that waited. On the morning of the 30th, as the month came to a quiet close, Cameron sat down earlier than usual. No one else in the building yet, no footsteps, just the creak of the wooden bench and the familiar hush of the hallway. He pulled out his notebook and added one final letter for November. Dear end of the month, we didn't rush you. We didn't demand answers. We just kept sitting, kept waiting, kept making room for one more story and one more heart brave enough to speak. You didn't erase the ache, but you gave it somewhere to rest. That's enough. He placed the letter beneath the bench, smoothed it flat. And when the first footsteps echoed toward him, when the first hand reached gently for the edge of the seat, when the first story of December began, Cameron was already there. Still, open, and ready. December arrived with frost on the windows and a different kind of silence. Not empty, just fuller. The kind that holds breath and memory at the same time. The kind that knows the holidays are complicated. That joy and grief often sit at the same table, sometimes in the same seat. Cameron showed up anyway, with thicker gloves now, a scarf tucked close, and letters that felt more like blankets than declarations. On the first Friday, a woman sat beside him carrying a paper bag in her lap. Her nails were chipped. Her eyes were clear but tired in the way people get when they've outlived their own expectations. I haven't celebrated a holiday in 10 years, she said. He nodded. You don't have to start today. She laughed once. I'm not here for decorations. I'm here because I needed to sit where someone would let me be. This is that place. She opened the paper bag and pulled out a small ornament. Ceramic, cracked down one side. She placed it on the bench between them. He gave it to me once, said it meant peace. She looked at it. I think it finally does. She left it behind. Cameron placed it gently on the shelf inside Gate 27 that night. Offerings that stayed. Between a photograph of 2 joined hands and a set of house keys tied with ribbon. Later that weekend, someone pinned a handwritten note to the bench cushion. I've spent most of my life wondering where I'm supposed to be. But today, I sat down and didn't feel out of place. Maybe that's enough for now. Cameron added a response beneath it in his careful, steady handwriting. That is more than enough. You found stillness. That counts. So does breathing. So does not walking away, and you're here. Let us hold the rest for a while. On the second Tuesday, a small group from a nearby shelter came to the courthouse. One of the advocates led a woman, barely older than a teenager, over to the bench. She didn't speak, just stared at her feet. The advocate leaned down and whispered, "This is where people stay. He doesn't ask questions." Cameron looked up and nodded once. The girl sat, knees drawn in, coat too thin. After a while she asked, "Do you know how many people come here and leave again?" "More than I can count." "How do you keep sitting?" "Because some of them don't leave, some of them stay, and that makes it worth it." She didn't say anything else, but when she stood, she left a card under the bench. He found it hours later. "I came because I was told to. I stayed because no one told me I had to be anything but me." That's the first time that's happened. Thank you. By the time the first snow fell, the courthouse had grown quieter, not because fewer people came, but because they came differently now, with reverence, with readiness, with the hope that something might be waiting for them besides judgment. And always Cameron was there. The bench never lost its place. Neither did he. On December 10th, he brought a new letter, handwritten, thick paper, corners rounded from being folded and refolded in his coat pocket. He placed it under the seat. Dear you, maybe this season brings up everything you've tried to bury. Maybe you're grieving someone who's still alive. Maybe you're holding it all so tightly that your hands have forgotten how to rest. Let this be your resting place. No lights, no songs, no pressure, just a bench, and someone who will sit with you in the dark. Until you remember, you don't have to find the light alone. We're here, still, always, and we're not leaving. And just like that, another day began. And someone new arrived, and the waiting kept its promise, because Cameron did. Mid-December settled in like a long exhale. Snow clung to the trees now, the courthouse windows fogged in soft circles. The air inside held a kind of hush, not the quiet of absence, but the reverence of people carrying heavy things and learning, slowly, that they didn't have to carry them alone. The bench looked the same as it always had, but the space around it had changed. It had become a ritual now. Some people stopped just to place a hand on the wood. Some came back and sat without speaking. A few brought others with them, whispering, "This is where I remembered I could." Cameron sat, as always, bundled in layers, thermos in hand, a new letter in his coat pocket. He unfolded it slowly, placed it beneath the bench with the others. The paper crinkled as it met the worn wood. Dear you, you don't have to celebrate to be part of something. You don't have to perform joy for anyone. You can sit here and feel all of it, the ache, the relief, the remembering, the letting go. This bench doesn't need you to smile. It just needs you to stay. And we will stay with you as long as it takes. At noon, a woman approached holding a small child wrapped in a yellow blanket. She looked at Cameron, then at the bench. "I don't want to tell the whole story," she said. "You don't have to." She sat. The child slept. The hallway buzzed around them, but the bench felt still. After a long silence, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny mitten, pink, knitted, small enough to disappear in one palm. She set it on the bench between them. "She wore this the first time we had to sleep in the car," she said. "I've kept it ever since. But we're not there anymore." She looked at him. "Is it okay if I leave it?" Cameron nodded. "It'll stay, like she did, like you did." She stood, adjusted the blanket, left without a word. That night, Cameron placed the mitten in the Survival to Sanctuary case at Gate 27. Leo stood nearby, stringing up another line of handwritten notes across the ceiling. "She say anything?" Leo asked. "Just enough." They stood in the quiet for a while. Later, back at the bench, Cameron found a new letter under the cushion. No name, just a line in smudged pencil. "You waited here before I knew I was coming, and that's the only reason I could." He didn't add anything. He just sat a little longer that night, not in expectation, but in promise, because someone would come tomorrow, and the bench would still be here, and so would he. The final days of December arrived with more quiet than snow, the kind of stillness that made every sound seem louder. Footsteps in the hallway, the click of courthouse doors, the soft rustle of paper beneath the bench. Even the air felt thoughtful, like it was waiting for something to end gently, not with noise, but with presence. Cameron arrived before sunrise on New Year's Eve. He hadn't planned to. He just woke up and knew someone might come today who thinks they missed their chance. So he sat. The lights in the building flickered on one by one. Staff trickled in with coffee cups and long scarves, nodding as they passed him. Just after 10 a.m., a teenage boy sat down beside him. Quiet, lean, chewed fingernails, and a hoodie that swallowed his hands. "I don't know what I'm doing here," he said without looking up. Cameron didn't answer right away. Then, "That makes two of us." The boy almost smiled. "I thought I was coming to fix something, but now I'm just tired." "You don't have to fix anything today," Cameron said. "You just have to stay long enough to know you're not broken." They sat for a while. Before leaving, the boy pulled a folded note from his pocket and left it on the bench. Cameron waited until he was gone to read it. "Dear me," this was supposed to be a beginning, but it feels like the end of something. Maybe that's okay. Maybe endings that happen on benches are actually where the real part starts. Cameron added it to the year's end envelope, a new tradition he'd started that week, a collection of December's last words. He didn't label them, didn't categorize them, just gathered them gently and kept them close. At noon, he left a final letter of his own beneath the bench. Dear you, if the calendar turning makes you nervous, if the new year feels too loud, too empty, too full of pressure, come sit. This bench doesn't reset. It doesn't erase. It remembers. It stays. And so do we. You're not too late. You're right on time for your own beginning. That night, while fireworks bloomed in the distance, Cameron walked back to the bench one last time. The courthouse was closed, the hallway dim, but he sat anyway, just for a few minutes, just to say thank you. Thank you to the silence, to the letters, to the ones who came and stayed and whispered, "I think I can do this now." And as the world crossed the line into a new year, Cameron stayed exactly where he'd promised he would be, on the bench, with room beside him, and a heart steady enough for whoever came next.